Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. I am Donnie's sister. I'm just up here to make some quick announcements. I'm not the Hebrew brains. But I just wanted to make some quick announcements just for those of you who don't know who we are, what Hebrew for the Nations is. We're just a small nonprofit ministry. Donnie teaches biblical Hebrew through live online classes. And our mission with that is really for people to use biblical Hebrew as a tool for enhanced biblical literacy so we can stand firm in our knowledge of the word in the last days. Our mission stems from Zephaniah 3:9. In the days of the Tower of Babel, men were seeking to be like God, and God thwarted that by dispersing them with multiple languages. And so in Zephaniah 3:9, we see that restoration that's going to happen. For then I will restore to the peoples a pure language that they may all serve the Lord in one accord. So that is what we are about. This year, we're really pushing to make biblical Hebrew even more accessible. The first year, this is our third year, and this is our first year doing a fundraiser. We're doing a fundraiser to just, in an effort to get biblical Hebrew online content for free, as well as lower the cost of our live online classes as well. So if you're interested in more info about that, we're going to be up here with a table, as well as here all week, of course. And let's see, we're going to be running another beginning biblical Hebrew course here in November. So if you're interested in any info on that as well, please feel free to find us. And yes, yeah, we're going to have a kids class as well that we have registration open for, as well as teens and adults, and as well as a intermediate course as well that will go through the book of Malachi. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to find us. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. Let me open up in prayer. Abba, Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity to study the building blocks of your scripture. Help us to, as we dig in just the small list of letters we're working on today, help us to glean so much from it. Help me to share things that impact, and help us to connect with you. In your Son's name I pray, amen. So, I've done workshops before, and here we go again. I see some new faces, and I've seen some familiar faces here, and I would like to thank everyone for being here today. My name is Donnie Matos. My passion is to study biblical Hebrew, and the reason why I study biblical Hebrew is because in my own personal testimony, I wanted to know God, and my way of wanting to know him personally, to seek connection with him, because the Hebrew word for knowledge is actually connection. So it's not really head knowledge, it's actually heart knowledge. And my desire to know God, right? I wanted to read scripture and to understand scripture, to understand him, because I love God and I love Yeshua. I started studying biblical Hebrew. And so today I would like to share a little bit of that with you. And yeah, where was I going? The slides. We're a little stuck on the slides. It's not working. Technology is a little slow this morning. So, as I was beginning to study Hebrew, one of the verses that stood out to me was Zephaniah 3, verse 9. You know what, guys? Just cut the slides. Forget about the slides. It's all right. Do we have a dry erase marker? We don't. Yeah. Yeah. Because the slides aren't working, but we'll just be flexible. So, as I was studying biblical Hebrew, one of the verses that stood out to me was Zephaniah 3, verse 9. It says, "For in those days I will restore to them a pure language, a pure speech." I am in the camp that I believe that Messiah is coming back soon. That means the kingdom of God is coming back soon. And as a result of that, I believe that our lives are going to change drastically. And there's so much we have to learn to prepare for that. And we're not like preparing because it's like some cool academic exercise. We're preparing because we are preparing for the kingdom. And when God created the world, he created the world using the Hebrew language. And when the kingdom comes back, that will be the holy language that will be restored. So I study Hebrew on one hand to study to like know God because it's the language he spoke creation into existence. It's the language he gave us scripture in. But I also study Hebrew because I understand that where I am going to need Hebrew again. So today, if you are taking this session with us, you may have gotten 3 sheets. Your first sheet will have all 22 of the Hebrew letters. Should look like this one. Then you'll have one sheet that says Hebrew Nikodot. The Hebrew word nikud literally means dot. It refers to vowel pointings. That is for a different time. That's just like for extra benefit. We're not going to go over that in class. And then in this sheet over here, you'll notice we'll talk about Genesis chapter 1:1 today because we're going to go over the first 2 letters of the alphabet today. It's Bereshit. It's Bereshit. Genesis 1:1. We're going to go over that, and also I have some notes on that for you too, just to give you an idea. So there are 22 letters in the alphabet, and every year when I prepare this workshop here, I feel like we go over Aleph and Beit. But the thing is, it's like with testimonies. It never can get old. It's amazing when you study the Hebrew and you just see the deeper meanings every time. But we could spend time on all 22 of the letters, but we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time between today and tomorrow. So as we are studying the Hebrew letters, part of why we study the Hebrew is because when you are given the in the Old Testament and the New Testament in English text, a lot of times it's translated with man's opinion, it's translated with church doctrine, it's translated with theologians and translators who have a theological bent. And even if it is a literal translation, that translation is limited to the English language. Because English is a language that is very abstract, but Hebrew is a language that is very concrete and action-based. I would say, I had a really nice day. Notice how there's a lot of adjectives there, and it's very vague in English, right? But if I say, Hayom hazeh, this day, Tov, this day is good, what I mean is this day accomplished its purpose, because the Hebrew word for Tov means it was good according to its purpose. So you see the difference in there, the difference of the mindsets. Also, the Hebrew letters are significant. Yeshua said not one jot or tittle. He's talking about the smallest letters of the Torah will be done away with. Because the smallest letters, the letters themselves are significant. Letters in Hebrew are very interesting because if you're looking at your sheet, you will notice that there's a design to them. And on here, I do not have the paleo letters. So you have the block letters that Ezra introduced after the Babylonian exile that are in front of you, that you would find typically on a Torah scroll. But then you also have the paleo Hebrews letters. So you have 2 sets of design meanings when you're looking at a Hebrew text or a Hebrew letter. So these letters have design meanings that point us to Messiah, that point us to deeper spiritual truths. And we'll talk more about that with Aleph and Beit. On top of that, their letter name is a word that has meaning. So we have 2 types of design meanings per letters. We have a letter name that also is a word. To give you an example, Aleph, right, it can mean Aleph, the letter Aleph, or it could be the word that means chieftain, a chieftain, an Aleph. And from it we get in our English the word aloof, meaning he's above it all. He's aloof. Or bait in the Hebrew can mean, it can mean bait, the letter bait, or it can mean house. Or my favorite one, every Hebrew letter is my favorite Hebrew letter, is Lamed. If you find Lamed, it's the really tall one on your Hebrew alphabet sheet, and Lamed can mean to learn or to teach. It means both, to learn and teach. Lamed is the Hebrew letter, right, that has a numerical value of 30 and is the tallest letter in the alphabet and makes the L sound. But at the same time, it is a word meaning teaching and learning. So now, as you are studying Hebrew, your brain is also thinking, what is the function of the letter in the text, in the original text? You can't get that with the English. If I am reading the New King James Bible, I'm not getting that. But if you are looking at your Genesis 1:1 sheet, you'll notice that the first letter in your whole Bible is a huge letter. You notice that huge letter on your Genesis 1:1 sheet that I gave you? It has a Hebrew verse. It's Genesis chapter 1:1. And on a Torah scroll, that letter, and you're asking, which side do I begin with on Hebrew? Hebrew is actually read on the right side. It's read right to left. So it's read opposite of how we read in English. And so you find that big letter bait. What did I just say bait represented? A house. So if you're thinking about how a house represents, how bait represents a house, your brain automatically, by looking at the Hebrew, sees that large bait at the beginning of the Bible. And what are you thinking of when you begin Genesis 1:1 in the Hebrew? A house. Yeah, a house. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So letters have design meanings. They have numerical value meanings. And they have name meanings, word meanings. They're words, they're numbers, and they are designs and pictures. So you can see there's a mindset that we have in English. The mindset is that it's either or. It's either or. It's very Greek. It's very logical. It's either or. But in the Hebrew mindset, it's more of what layer of the onion are you? Does one letter, is it identified by its numerical meaning? Or is it identified by its design meaning? Or its verb meaning? Which one is it? The Greek mindset would have you pick one of those. But the Hebrew mindset would say it's all coexisting, just as an onion has different layers. So a Hebrew word, a Hebrew letter itself has different layers of meaning. It just depends on what layer of the onion you're looking at. So, going through your list of Hebrew letters, a good thing to remember is, as you are looking through the letters, you want to remember to read them right to left. And for practice today, even though we're going to just stick with the first two letters, let's just read all the letters. What's the first letter? Aleph. At the top of Aleph, you'll see the number 1. That's that letter's numerical value. Right? So what's Aleph's numerical value? 1. All right, what's the next letter? Bait. Is there a dot in bait in that picture? No. So if you see a dot in bait, it's making the bus sound because that dot makes the letter hard. But if it has no dot, it's making the v sound, the V sound. So just remember that. You can make a note there and write that on your notes page. What's the next letter? Gimel. And what's the numerical value of Gimel? 3. Okay, what's the next letter? Dalet. All right, so as you're going through these, also remember that if you want to know the letters sound, what sound the letter makes, what's the first sound in the letter's name? All right, so let's go to hey. What sound do you think hey makes? Ha. It's like a breath of air. It has a numerical value of 5. Okay, what about vav? V. And what's its numerical value? All right, zayin has a numerical value of 7. What sound does it make? All right, good. What about chet? Good job. You guys got the guttural down. What's its numerical value? 8. All right, so we already are thinking of the sounds the letters make, their numerical value. We don't necessarily, you probably are looking at the design a little bit, but not too much worried about that. What's number 9? Tet. What sound does it make? Good job. All right, what's the next one? Yod. What sound does yod make? Yod can also be a vowel extender like Y in English. What's its numerical value? 10. Okay, what's the next letter? Kaf. What sound does kaf make? I heard someone say ch. That's because kaf also has a dot in it sometimes. So what does a dot do? It hardens a letter. So if you have a dot in the belly, it can double a letter or harden a letter. So it makes the letter harder. Ch is a lot softer and k is harder. All right, so kaf. All right, there's the awesome lamed we were talking about next. And what's its numerical value? 30. Do you also notice that at yod, between yod and kaf, we stopped counting by ones? So in Hebrew, when you reach 10, what happens? 10. So if I wanted to make 11, in Hebrew, I would do yod, which has a numerical value of 10. And what value would I have for the 1 in 11? Aleph. So yod and aleph would be 11. Okay. So we're at lamed going up to mem. What's mem's numerical value? So our numerical signs are from the Arabic. So for Hebrew, the letters themselves, unless they're borrowing Arabic numerals, they would use letters. And they would have like special like parentheses showing that it's a number. So that's a good question. Yes. So you would start with your biggest letter and move down the biggest number letter and then move down to your smallest letter. So you would start in the hundreds place and then you would start in go to the tens place next and then you would be in the ones place next. It's not like Roman. Yeah. So nun comes next. Nun makes what sound? And it has a numerical value of 50. Samech comes next. Samech comes next. It has a numerical value of 60. What sound do you think it makes? Ayin comes next. And ayin has a numerical value of 70. Ayin and aleph, you'll notice they begin with vowels. So in simple Israeli modern Hebrew, and for the sake of this class, both of those are not solid consonants. Aleph, which is 1, and ayin, which has a numerical value of 70, they're actually vowel holders. So both of those letters say nothing unless they have a vowel attached to them. So Aleph, which is 1, says nothing unless a vowel is attached to it. So remember that. We're not going to worry about ayin today, but we're going to worry about Aleph. All right, pei. What sound does pei make? P, p. What's its numerical value? 80. Now, if there's a dot in pei, it's going to be the P, but if there's a no dot, it's going to be soft. What do you think the soft sound of P is? F. So if there's no dot, pay makes the f sound, like the F sound. But if there is a dot, it makes the p sound. Now looking at pay, it's really small on your sheet. Do you notice something about the pay? There's another letter connected to it. What do you notice about pay? A bait? Inside, look at the white space inside the pay. In the pay, number 80. A bait in the pay. For those of you who have taken Hebrew already, what does pay as a letter represent? What word does it represent? Ray, help me out. It's a mouth. I knew. Pay is the letter that means mouth. And we'll look at later at Genesis chapter 1, your sheet. But the word bara also begins with a bait. So in the mouth is this letter that bait, which stands for bara, creation. So the power of creation is in the mouth. And the pagans and the occult recognize this. This is why a lot of witches say abracadabra, which in the Aramaic, which is related to Hebrew, it means I will, abara means I will create, and kadabra means as I speak. Because the pagans recognize the power of creation in the speech, but many Christians do not. And our brother Judah, from the tribe of Judah, not those that are more loyal to Torah, those that are more Torah observant of the Jewish people, the Orthodox community, also recognize the need to pray and speak blessings in our lives. Because of this letter, inside the mouth is the power to create life and death. Being made in the image of God, we have that power. All right, the next letter is tzadeh. Tzadeh has a numerical value of what? 90. What sound do you think tzadeh makes? It's not like the z, like zayin, and you all are correct. It makes the tz sound like in Ritz. Pizza. I like that. Pizza. Tzatziki sauce. And then after it is kof. Kof. Kof has a numerical value of 100. And kof makes the k sound. And then after it, you notice the next letter is resh. And are we counting by tens anymore? No, we're counting by hundreds. So kof has a numerical value of 100. Resh has a numerical value of 200. And resh makes the what sound? Now in Hebrew, resh, if you are in Eastern Europe and you're Jewish, you're going to say r. You're going to roll the r at the front of your mouth. And if you're in Israel, because a lot of Israelis speak Hebrew that descended from the Jewish people who came from Spain, when they were deciding to bring back the Hebrew language for the nation of Israel in 1948, they chose Sephardic Hebrew. Why Sephardic Hebrew? Because Sephardic Hebrew, which is Hebrew spoken by Jews from Spain, had a more beautiful sound, and the R actually, unlike Spanish R's, which are r at the front of the throat, is actually, the Sephardic R is at the back of the throat. Ra, ra, ra. So you could actually sound like Chewbacca from Star Wars and go ra, but it's actually ra. It's, if you speak French, it's at the resh. It's at the back of the throat. Roni, roni. It's like roni, roni means sing, but it's actually at the back of the throat. But it's, if you listen to ever like conversation spoken in modern Hebrew or music in modern Hebrew, it is like so beautiful. I was working with, one of my jobs I was working at, and someone was playing reels. And they were playing reels from Israel, and they're like secular. But it was like Israeli speaking. And I could recognize the Hebrew because it's so beautifully unique. A lot of it has to do with the R's. All right. The next letter is Shin. What is Shin's numerical value? 300. Now, Shin makes the sh sound when the dot is on the right hand, but when the dot moves to the left hand, signifying restriction. Your right hand represents loving kindness. Yeshua talks about the sheep on the right hand, and then he talks about the goats separated for judgment on the left hand, and judgment is very restricting. So when you move the dot on Shin from the right hand to the left hand, you restrict that sh into an S. So Shin becomes seen. And then you have your last letter, Tav, which has a numerical value of 400. Right? And what sound does Tav make? T, t. Now, Tav makes that sound, but when there's a dot in its belly, it's going to make the T sound. And then when there's no dot in its belly, it's going to make the S sound. But if you're in Israel, it doesn't matter if there's a dot or no dot. It's always a T. But the reason why I'm saying that is you may have heard of Sabbath with a TH. That's because there's no dot in that. You also may have heard of, if you're in New York, Shabbos. That's because the last letter is that Tav, and it has no dot in its belly. And then you have Shabbat, if you're just a native Israeli in the land. And even though there's no dot, it's still a T. So it just depends on what culture you're a part of. All right, so now that we've gone through all the letters, I want to dig in and focus on Aleph. So Aleph has two designs to it. It has its basic design, if you guys can see. Can you guys see what I'm writing on the screen? Okay, so this is the common design. I am going to write a big diagonal line from top to bottom. Then I am going to create another small line. Go below the midpoint of the first line. So if the midpoint of the first line was right there, go below it. You are not making an X. You are not making an X. When I was first learning Aleph, I would make X's all the time. And then for the final part of Aleph, you go above the midpoint of line 1, and then you go down. So really, what you're saying is that the letter that has a numerical value of 10, what letter is that? Yod. And Yod is the smallest letter. Its Greek translation would be iota. Not Yoda in Star Wars, but iota, which means a jot. So when Yeshua is talking about not one jot or tittle will be removed from Torah, he's talking about a Yod, the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So, and then you have down here another Yod. And Yod in Hebrew is a word that means hand. So we have two hands. And it has a numerical value of 10. Tuck the 10 in the back of your brain. And then the middle letter has a numerical value of 6. What letter is that? Vav. Now to my people who know what Vav means, what does Vav mean in the Hebrew? Nail, hook, tent peg. So what does a nail represent? What is the function of a nail? To attach. To attach. Are we attaching one object to itself? To another object. So we have two objects that are separated. We need to connect them. So we use a nail or a tent peg. On a deeper level, when God was building his sanctuary on earth, he told them to make the sanctuary and then to take Vav's tent pegs and secure the tabernacle down with Vav. So Vav is this connection, this letter of connection. We'll talk more about it. But Vav, which represents connection, connecting heaven to earth, the place of connection between heaven and earth, connects the upper hand to the lower hand. The upper hand is in heaven, the lower hand is on earth. Yes, Ray? Yes. What is the numerical value of that? I'm going to spell it out, but I'm going to substitute the letter hey with a dalet. Yod. We'll call this a hey. I'm going to erase it. That's the divine name. So 10, 5, 6, 5. What is that? 26. Let's look at Aleph. Heaven and earth connected together, two hands, 10, 10, and 6. 26. Aleph is one of the letters with God's signature, Yahweh's signature. It's one of the letters that connects heaven and earth. On a deeper level, we're talking about how it represents heaven and earth. The central part is that Vav stem. Looking at your Genesis 1:1 sheet, can you spot the Vav on your sheet? Vav looks like this, like a little nail, right? You probably see it right over here, if you're seeing where I'm pointing. The word before it is Hashemayim. Hashemayim means heaven. Ve'et means and ha'aretz means the earth. So Vav first shows up in your Torah with the purpose to connect two things, heaven and earth. So the whole purpose of your scriptures is to connect heaven and earth. Yes, Stevie. The reason why, that was done on purpose. The reason why, if you look down here when I spelled the divine name with the dalet instead of a hey, is because I'm going to erase that, and out of respect for the divine name, I didn't want to erase God's name. But that was personal choice. Yes?
So, hey, does that mean, Hayah? Does that mean like, does hey have anything to do with behold? Or to,
Yes.
so then it's Yod, hand, behold, nail, behold.
Correct. So just looking at Yahweh's name, right? The Yod would be the hand. And in Hebrew, that would be like, it's not really hand for Yod, because your Yod is like from your shoulder to your fingertips. That's your Yod, your hand. Has the YD. Vowel is slightly different between hand, Yod, and Yod, the letter. But it's still the same word. So your shoulder all the way to your fingertips is your Yod. Everyone wave your Yod, you know? Now the palm of your hand's called a kaf. That's the letter that makes a numerical value of 20. So that's the difference in Hebrew. So behold, so the hand, behold, the nail, right? Behold. It's literally what God's name says. So already in two levels, it's pointing to Yeshua the Messiah. On one level, it's pointing to Yeshua the Messiah as through the letter Aleph, connecting heaven and earth, because that's Yeshua's function, to connect heaven and earth, to restore the broken relationship with the Father who's in heaven. Right? That's the purpose of, if Yeshua, the Aleph is a picture of Yeshua. But also, in God's name, which has the numerical value of Aleph's design. Aleph has a numerical of 1 or 1,000. We'll talk about that in a second. 1 or 1,000. But Aleph, its design, if you count the individual three parts, Yod, Vav, Yod, Aleph as a design has a numerical value of 26. So what is Aleph's numerical value? 1, 1,000, or 26? Yes. Yes is the answer. All three is the answer. It just depends on how you're looking at the onion. So, as I was studying this back when I was relearning Hebrew, I was thinking about Aleph, and I was talking over it with family members. And we were also talking about how this Aleph represents connection between heaven and earth. And we were talking about how it also represents Yeshua, who is both God and man. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. So Yeshua is like fully divine, but at the same time, he's fully man. And theology that ignores one or the other, right, is bad theology. It's incorrect to assume that Yeshua is fully God and not fully man, just as it is heretical to assume that Yeshua is fully man but has no element of divine in him. So, he is God, but he's also man. And so he connects heaven and earth this way and also restores heaven and earth together. As I'm going through, I'm wondering, where's Elizabeth? I was going to ask if she can give me a wipe. You already thought about it. Awesome. So as I'm wiping this out, keep in mind that as we are adding layers to this, right? Oh, man. I think I'm going to write with red. I think I'm just going to write with the red one because that one seems to work. This one requires a little bit of elbow grease, but we're good. It's a used board. Okay. Good. So as we're writing with this, we are keeping in mind that Aleph represents the letter where heaven and earth come together. It's because the Vav, the two hands, are connected to each other. Aleph represents heaven and earth coming together, God who's fully man. There's a Hebrew word called Golah. And Golah has Gimel, which is your third letter. Then it has Vav. Then it has Lamed, the letter I really like. And then it has a Hey. And that spells Golah. Right? Golah is the Hebrew word for exile. Exile. So, if we know that God wants to connect heaven and earth, exile is when there is no connection between heaven and earth. When God's people are cast out of the land, we are separated from the kingdom and God removes his presence from his people. That is Golah. That is exile. Now, if I take Golah, I'm going to make room. It's being read this way. And I insert the letter Aleph into exile. I have Ge'ulah. And Ge'ulah sounds a lot like Golah. Golah is exile, but Ge'ulah is redemption. So we have the same word, but if we remove the Aleph, we have exile. But if we put the Aleph in, exile is turned into redemption. Because Aleph connects heaven and earth. It repairs the gap. Now, what does Aleph represent? It represents, well, Yeshua is Aleph and Tav. But the letter Aleph itself is also a picture of Yeshua because it shows that Yeshua, who connects heaven and earth, who is fully God and fully man, who restores the gap between us and God. Like the Michelangelo painting where Michelangelo has God pointing at Adam and their two fingers are touching, right? That is the moment where exile becomes redemption. Another layer of the onion. So we talked about Aleph is 1. It is 26. What else is the numerical value of Aleph? Do you remember? I said it like 5 minutes ago. 1,000. That's because Achad, which begins with an Aleph, is 1. But if I were to say Aleph in Hebrew, do you hear how Aleph sounds like Aleph? Aleph and Aleph. Aleph is the Hebrew word for 1,000. So, in showing it, I would write an Aleph, and I would add like a couple parentheses to show that that is 1,000 instead of 1. So, Aleph can mean 1 or 1,000. And so, if you're looking at your Genesis chapter 1 sheet that I gave you, how many Alephs do you notice in that verse? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. 6 Alephs. Aleph is 1 or 1,000. So the numerical value of all the Alephs in that verse is 6 or 6,000. So there's a verse that says, 1 day is like 1,000 years in your sight, O Lord. 1 year, 1, is like 1,000 years, 1,000 in your eyes. How many days of the week do we work? 6. And we rest on the 7th. We're commanded to rest on the 7th, but I'm also commanded to work on 6 days. So I can't be lazy the 6 days, because I have to be about my master's business those 6 days working. And then from an Israelite perspective, a Hebrew perspective, there's 6,000 years of man. And then the 7th millennium is redemption. Is when Messiah is back on earth. So when you're looking at your sheet in front of you, right, reading right to left, opposite of how you read in English, opposite direction. Aleph, the first 2 Alephs, what number are they in the word? Are they first, second, third? They're third. Yeah, in the first and second words, those 2 Alephs are in the third position. Okay, let's find the next Aleph. 2 Alephs. Their first position. All right, the last 2 Alephs, what position are they? Second. All right, so a lot of the Jewish community, if you read a lot of their prophecies, what they prophesy about Messiah, they actually, the Orthodox, I'm not talking Jewish. For me, you could be Jewish by birth, but that doesn't mean you're living a life that has fruit. For me, when I say Jewish, I'm referring to our brother Judah who's trying to keep the Torah. Their eyes are blinded to Yeshua, but they're still seeking God every day and they're trying to keep the Torah. I'm talking about Orthodox Jews. I'm not talking necessarily about Jews in general, just to define that for you. Our brother Judah, the Jewish community, their rabbis identify those 6 Alephs as being in the third, second, and first, third, first, and second positions for a reason. The third, the 2 Alephs that are in the third position, represent the first 2,000 years of mankind where God is furthest from mankind. That's the age of Tohu. Tohu means chaos. Why chaos? What happened at the beginning of those 2,000 years? Everything was chaos. And on the day, that Adam and Eve were given the choice between the 2 trees, what did they choose? Death. They brought death and chaos into the world. Death and chaos are embodied in the letter Mem, by the way. That has a numerical value of 40. But there's also hidden resurrection in that. Because 40 has a numerical value of the amount of weeks in a pregnancy where a child comes forth and is born again. So there's that's a story for another time. So you have this age of chaos where death is introduced into the world. That's the first 2,000 years of mankind. Then Aleph is in the first position, because who answers God's call in Genesis chapter 12? I'm looking at Stevie because I know Stevie knows this question. Genesis 12:12, who answers the call of Lech Lecha? Go. Who answers the call of Lech Lecha in Genesis 12:1 and brings God's connection back down to earth? Abraham. Avraham. God says, Lech Lecha. Avraham, and even though he did not know God until he's about 70, and his family, if you read the backstory on them, are idol worshipers, he knew something was wrong, and there was some creator beyond himself, and he was hungry and searching, and never complacent in his hunger and search. And because of that and that faith in God, he's like at the age of 75, no, I reject the idolatry. I'm going to serve God. And he destroys his family idols, which is another story for another time. He's thrown in a fiery furnace. That's why in Genesis chapter 12 it says he comes from Ur of the Chaldean. It's the furnace of the Chaldees he comes from. And the backstory on that is he was thrown in a furnace like his Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be thrown in the furnace in Chaldea years later. And so when God says, go to the place that I have for you in Genesis chapter 12, if you had been saved from a fiery furnace, would you not operate in faith and say, God, I'll go anywhere you let me go? On a deeper level, that means we all have been saved from our own fiery furnace that we were going to be thrown into. So we all have the call to faith to go to the promise and destination that God has for us. So, 1,000, it's the age of Torah. Abraham answers God's call. He's justified by his faith. He's made righteous by faith. In this age, Israel is exiled. Yes.
Just wanted to add something to that beautiful imagery.
Yeah.
Both of those fiery furnaces were in Iraq, like present-day Iraq.
And present-day Iraq, Babylon. Present-day Iraq. So the Torah, this is the age. Israel listens to the Torah. They bring it down. Those are the next two olives. Olives in the one position, first letter in the word. And God appears to them on Mount Sinai. And there's a temple that's built, but the temple's destroyed because they sin. And then they're in exile, the Babylonian exile, and then they're brought back. And then about the 4,000-year mark after creation, someone shows up. Fully God, fully man, Yeshua. And he appears in the letter that means and, heaven and earth. But he goes away to prepare a place. And for the next 2,000 years, we're in the age of Messiah, waiting for his return. And so you can see the plan of creation was laid out from the beginning in Genesis chapter 1:1 by all the olives. So if you have time, go through and circle those olives that I have in Genesis chapter 1:1 for you. Circle those olives and note which position they are and make those distinctions. So, let's move on from Aleph. I feel like that was a lot. And keeping in mind while I'm erasing that Aleph represents redemption from exile. So ultimately, this is God's plan to bring heaven down to earth. This is his plan to bring his house down to earth. And this leads me to the next letter. What's that next letter that you see that comes after Aleph? Beit or Veit. And Beit is a letter we talked about. If there's a dot in it, right, it's B. If there's no dot, it's V. And in Orthodox rabbinic thought, the presence of that dot actually represents the presence of a kingdom. That dot represents the presence of a kingdom, but that dot also represents humility and humbling yourself, because Yod, the letter Yod, is a dot. So becoming like a little dot, becoming like nothing, brings the kingdom into your life. So, and it makes you stronger in your walk. It transforms you from a vate, a soft vate, to a harder bait. But as we're looking at Genesis chapter 1:1 on your sheet, right? On a Torah scroll, that bait would be enlarged. Because bait is a Hebrew word that means house. A house. And you can see how there's a roof, how there's a wall, and there's a floor in this house. If you look at the paleo even has the layout of a house, and that's what the paleo looks like, right over there. And so this would be like your door going into the house, and I'm walking to the house. So whether or not you're looking at it from Aramaic script, or you're looking at it from the ancient paleo, it still represents a house. So we were talking about the 6,000-year plan of God is to create a house on earth, and house can represent a dynasty, a kingdom. It can represent the connection between heaven and earth. It can also represent a marriage. Because what is the numerical value of bait? 2. And when we're connecting heaven and earth, heaven is masculine, earth is feminine. By the way, please let me know when I'm running out of time. We should be leaving at 10:30. We're over time? 10:45. Yeah. Yeah. It could also be a body.
So the dot, the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Yes. That's another layer of it. Because your body is your house. And that's why your body is also called a temple. The temple is called the Beit HaMikdash, the holy house. And so as a holy house, we are supposed to live differently. Yes, I saw your hand go up. We got 5 minutes. We can do this in 5 minutes. So, Beit also signifies a married person. Because the high priest in Leviticus chapter 16 has to make atonement for him and his house. So the ancient rabbis of Israel asked a question. They're like, what does the Torah mean when it says the high priest on Yom Kippur has to make atonement for him and his house? What does that mean, that a high priest has to atone for him and his house? It means that the high priest has to atone for him and his wife. Which means, according to Torah law, the high priest is not a Catholic priest who is celibate. He must be married. If he's going to intercede on Israel's behalf on Yom Kippur, he must understand what it means to be married, because he's helping restore the connection between God and heaven. Heaven's a masculine noun, and earth, which is a feminine noun. He's restoring the connection between the heavenly bridegroom and the earthly bride. So he must understand what marriage means, and he must atone for him and his wife, which is why the priest must be married. And according to halakha, they actually appoint a backup wife in case his main wife dies.
And the marriage that was destroyed in Genesis.
Yes. So it's about restoring marriage, connecting the feminine and masculine, the masculine and the feminine together. So Beit represents a house, also because in Israel, a young man does not have his own house until he's about ready to get married. A young man is with his father and his mother, then cleaves to his wife, and they leave the home, and he leaves his father and mother, joins to his wife, and they build their own home and start their new home biblically. Which means you see a young man building a house. If we were in the same Torah community in first century Israel and he was my buddy, I would say, hey man, who's the lucky lady? Because house is synonymous with wife, because the wife makes the home in the house. Because you can have the structure itself, but the wife in the home makes it beautiful. So, that is the letter bait. And as you look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, we see through the letters aleph and bait that God's plan is to restore the broken connection. But ultimately, it's his way of restoring his marriage with his bride. And that's us. Any more questions before we go? Or comments? Yes. Yes, aleph does not make a sound. That was something we're going to touch on too, but there's so much in the letter aleph that I didn't get to. The letter aleph does not make a sound. So if we're thinking about Yeshua, aleph in the paleo represents the strong ox. So it's the one who overcomes. The one who overcomes death, right? But aleph does not make a sound. Aleph needs a vowel. Aleph needs a vowel to make a sound. So if aleph is by itself, it will be silent. But if I give an a vowel, I put an a vowel underneath aleph, right? So if I draw my letter aleph, can you guys see the letter aleph? Let me step out of the way, right? That aleph is silent, right? Now I put the a vowel underneath it. What does it say? It says ah. If I were to put an e vowel, it would say eh or a. If I put an I under it, I'd say e, right, like as in pizza. Or o attached to it would be o. The point is, aleph is silent except when told to say what it should say. And that to me also represented how Yeshua said, I say nothing except what my Father tells me to say. So that is another deeper level understanding of aleph. Yes, Anne. Yes. Yes. I love that analogy. Yes, Josh. It does not. So Anne-Marie was touching on what Anne-Marie was saying, and I'm also touching on what Josh says. Anne-Marie mentioned how aleph represents how it's stagnant, not in motion, but when you attach a vowel to it, and you attach the command of a vowel to it, it is moving, and it has movement. And Josh was saying, was the Dagesh in the paleo? It wasn't. So vowels and Dageshes were not in the original paleo, and here's why. The people who spoke the language already assumed them being there. And the concept was the letters represented just like people have souls, but you don't see the souls, but you see the person, not the soul. So the letters had vowels and dageshes and punctuation attached to them, but you could not see that. But as people started wandering away from the Torah, not learning Hebrew, they lost all that, so they had to bring in vowel pointings and dageshes and punctuation to show people who are not as learned in Torah how to pronounce the Hebrew. Yeah. Any more questions?